Had a piece of pie, had a piece of pudding. Well, I give it all away to Hugs Had a Good One.
Down south, language is a colorful blend of vibrant parlance and down-home humor.
Which you did you? You didn't bring your truck with you, did you?
In this part of our journey, you'll hear flamboyant and distinctive dialects from Appalachia.
Hey, boy, put that car in the garage.
Down to the Tex-Mex border, where we'll see if English itself is endangered.
They got calls, threats, what are you doing, speaking Spanish as an official language in America.
It's a sizzling combo of rich cultures and traditions.
We like our food spicy and we like our language spicy.
This time on Do You Speak American?
Do you speak American?
Do you speak American?
Do you speak American?
You speak American, dog?
Do you speak American?
Tu parles américain?
¿Ustedes hablan American?
Do You Speak American has been made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities, promoting excellence in the humanities. Additional funding is provided by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Rosalind P. Walter, and the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations.
We're on a journey that takes us across the USA and through the American language. Now we're going to find out how today's Southerners answer the question, do you speak American? The greatest division America ever experienced was between North and South, and that is still reflected in our language.
Now we're running along the beautiful Ohio River to Louisville, Kentucky. The Ohio River, the traditional northern boundary of the southern accent. So is it true that the Ohio River...
Walt Wolfram, a linguist from North Carolina, is on board for this part of the trip.
The first group to settle an area seems to have a lasting effect on the dialect area. And even though we've had all these changes over a couple hundred years, the original dialect boundaries seem to be fairly intact still.
The first English speakers to settle around here were frontier fighters like Daniel Boone and later Davy Crockett, who pushed through the Cumberland Gap and down the Ohio and Tennessee rivers. Mostly Scots-Irish, they spread their way of speech from Pennsylvania to West Virginia and down the Appalachian Trail into Kentucky and Tennessee. That speech lives on in the hills of Appalachia, but it too is disappearing.
This was shot in the series of Story of English, you know.
Sure,
and
I know, I use it all the time.
You use this? Oh, well,
yeah,
you know
sure.
this then.
Yeah, I know well.
Yeah, this is Mrs. Hicks and Ray Hicks telling us how you get to their house.
You fly in an airplane as far as you can come. Then you get in a car or truck and ride as far as you can go and hit. Then you get down and run as far as you can. Then you crawl on your hands and knees as far as you can come. Go that way. Then you straighten up, and then you find a house. It's an old-timey one. It looks haunted, but it's really not.
Ray Hicks used to be famous round here. People would come from miles around to hear him tell folk tales in one of the last surviving examples of true Appalachian dialect.
Howdy!
Howdy, howdy. Now, howdy. That sounds more like Texas to me, but that's...
Yeah, they do use some of that in Appalachia.
Howdy, Ray. Howdy. How are you today? Just amazing. How are you? Just come on in.
Howdy, Ray.
Just come on in.
Tell us a ghost story, Ray. Yeah, tell us a ghost story.
Okay.
Ray Hicks loved to tell Jack tales. The most famous is Jack and the Beanstalk. In this story, Jack meets a beggar who gives him a magic sack.
He says, I'm going to give you something. He said, here's a sack that if anything gets to bothering you, just say whickety-whack into this sack.
Wickety-whack into the sack?
Yeah, well, he's got so many of the traditional features of Appalachian dialect, the and a hunting and a fishing, and the use of the tar, and the H before the it and so forth. And it's really neat that you preserve this because Ray recently passed away.
Today, fewer and fewer people speak like the late Ray Hicks and his wife, Rosa. The old mountain dialect may be vanishing, but when we went ashore at a little place called Rabbit Hash, Kentucky, it seemed to me the local talk was still distinctive and vigorous.
How are you?
Doing?
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Dwayne Doyle.
Hi, Dwayne.
Nice to meet you.
Robin McNeil.
Yeah.
Walt Wolfram, pleased to meet you.
We're down the road got muddy, stomped my toe, couldn't stand steady. Up on the hillside, I seen Sally coming, well, I thought to my soul, killed myself a running. Had a piece of pie, had a piece of pudding, well, I give it all away to hug Sally Gooden.
You think the language is changing much?
Well, it is. You know, now down home where I'm from, down in, I'm from close to the Tennessee line. I said Tennessee and Kentucky both, they claim me. Tennessee claims I'm from Kentucky, Kentucky claims I'm from Tennessee. And now down there they call a sheep, a female sheep, a ewe. I mean a yo. Up here they call it a ewe. Down there they call it a yo.
Right.
And they'd say, "Hey boy, put that car in the grudge." I said, "The grudge is what you have against somebody." The guy said, "No." I said, "Dad telling me put the car in the grudge every day." See, we talk like that, and y'all.
Is that one of the things you grew up saying?
Oh yeah, I said yeah. And over yonder, and all
over
that,
yonder, right?
And it's a fur piece.
The fur piece.
Yeah, I tell them that it's not. When I go over to Ohio, I said it's not a fur piece to Rabbit Hash. It's just 3 hops and jump in the Ohio River and 2 or 3 swamps, and there you are. Yeah. Now just like you say, we'd say you all, and up here they'd say yous all, and yous and yos and you all and yo all.
You ever hear yins?
Oh, Ewans. Oh, yes, sir. That's my father was from North Carolina, and it was Ewans.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
they'd say,
the mountains of North Carolina.
And then when they would treat a person, do a bad turn for it, instead of saying, "I wouldn't serve a dog like that," they'd say, "I wouldn't serve a dog like that."
Serve a dog.
I wouldn't serve a dog like that.
Yeah.
And fetch,
Yeah, go fetch it.
And they get me a poke to put something in. They don't call it a bag.
The bag, yeah.
Yeah, I know all that stuff, I was playing up here one night in a place where they danced, and some lady fell out on the floor, and I said, "Hey, come here, and I'll pick you up." I told her, I said, "Come over here, I'll pick you up." Well, I was on the hillside, seen Sally coming, thought to my soul, killed myself around. Had a piece of pie, well, had a piece of pudding, well, I give it all away to hug Sally Gooden. Had a piece of pie, had a piece of pudding, well, I give it all away to hug Sally Gooden.
You've studied so many different aspects of American speech. What would you say is the most important trend in our language now?
I think that one of the most important trends is the fact that we're coming to celebrate and recognize some of the dialect differences as a part of our natural cultural heritage, rather than simply try to stamp them out, to eradicate them. Speaking is part of culture. It's part of simply defining themselves. I think a sort of growing celebration of dialect differences is one of the most encouraging signs that I've seen.
Today, the country speech of Appalachia has absorbed other southern dialects and traveled throughout the Sun Belt. You can hear this influence all over the USA in the lingo of truckers like David Swain with their CB radios. David's handle is Spanky.
Northbound. You look good up there to Franklin, up there at 65 is where I started, okay?
Everybody sounds real country when they're talking on the CB.
They do. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I don't even know if I do.
You do. I thought you did when you were talking.
I don't know. It's a CB slang, I guess. I don't know what it is.
Is that the same all over the country?
I don't know. It's a CB slang, I guess. I don't know what it is. Uh-huh. Is that the same all over the country?
Is that the same all over the country?
I don't know. It's a CB slang, I guess. I don't know what it is. Uh-huh. Is that the same all over the country? Yeah, pretty much. Everybody pretty much sounds the same way, and I don't know why.
Spanky, you say you play music on the road. What's your favorite kind of music?
My favorite's country music.
Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've got a nephew that's in the country music business, Cody, and he lives in Nashville. And his, to be honest with you, his CD has taken me many miles.
Well, some things make me fighting mad while I'm motoring along. I like to watch a brand new backhoe tear down a 100-year-old barn. Well, it makes me wish that I was rich, 'cause I'd buy up that farmland, find the folks who were forced to sell and hand it back to them. Now I'm inspired. You better believe it.
Spanky's nephew is the country singer Cody James. Cody looks, sounds, and sings pure country. But he and Kenny Hayes, his co-songwriter, aren't even from this part of the country.
Neither of you is from the real South. You're originally from Oregon, you're from Maryland, which is near the South, but not in. When you do this kind of music, do you have to sound country and Southern?
I don't think that you necessarily have to, but it's real comfortable. And when you start doing it, like doing it, right there's an example, it's easier to talk that way than it is when you start doing it and enunciating everything perfectly.
Or when you start saying, doing it. It sounds funny coming out of your mouth.
Yeah, sure it does. It's hard to say. It has character.
And it's friendly.
Yeah, very much so.
What do you mean it has character?
It has character. I don't know, country's just, it's fun to hear.
Blue eyes just gleaming, the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
Music like Cody's is part of the popular culture that is making talkin' country the informal way to speak American. You can hear it almost anywhere, turning its Appalachian origins into a national trend. John Fott has studied the New South phenomenon, that vogue for Southern ways and country talk that now seems to reach farther and farther.
For a long time, the most rapid population growth percentages in the U.S. have been in the inland southern area, the Sun Belt. This dialect is a very large dialect, and it's perfectly to be expected that we would see a lot of it. It has probably the largest body of speakers of any of the American dialects now, and this will only grow with time.
So, Southern, inland Southern, is now the largest dialect in America and growing?
I hope so. But it seems confirmed by the 2000 census.
By contrast, the other strand of Southern speech, the dialect of the coastal or plantation South, is losing influence. It's being swept away by time and civil rights and the migration of Northerners. City dwellers in the Deep South are even pronouncing their R's. But here in Oxford, Mississippi, what's celebrated today is language that endures. Among the cultural treasures of the South is its literary tradition, and Mississippi can boast two of America's greatest writers, William Faulkner and Eudora Welty. In their recorded voices, you can hear the cultivated speech of Mississippi of 2 generations ago. For instance, this is Eudora Welty reading from her story, The Optimist's Daughter.
So I was forced to the conclusion I started seeing behind me. Fay laughed, a single high note as derisive as a jay's. Yes, that's disturbing. Dr. Cortland rolled forward on his stool. Let's just have a good look.
Eudora Welty told me a story about her accent. In the late 30s, she attended Columbia University in New York and lived in the women's residence. The woman who ran the residence would give free theater and concert tickets to the students. After a couple of months, Eudora went to her and said, Why did I never get any? And the woman said, with your accent, we didn't think you'd be interested in cultural activities.
That kind of prejudice is still alive today, if more good-humored. The stand-up comedian Jeff Foxworthy bases a large part of his act around it. He must be onto something, because wherever he plays, he fills the house.
Speaking of words, got a few more Southern words for you. First one, mayonnaise. Mayonnaise, a lot of people here tonight. It's kind of a gift. They come to me in my sleeve. I write them down. Innuendo. Hey, dude, I saw a bird fly in your window.
Do you think Northern people think Southerners are stupid because of the way they talk?
Yes, I think so, and I think Southerners really don't care that Northern people think that. You know, I mean, some of the most intelligent people I've ever known talk like I do. In fact, I used to do a joke about that, about, you know, the Southern accent. I said, nobody wants to hear their brain surgeon say, all right, now what we're going to do is saw the top of your head off, root around in there with a stick and see if we can't find that dad-burned clot.
Urinal. I told my brother, urinal, a lot of trouble when Daddy gets home. And last but not least, which-you did you? Which-you did you? Hey, you didn't bring your truck with you, did you?
Down the great Mississippi River now, we're leaving the South. Ahead are the states where English rubs up against many languages, and speaking American takes on a whole new character.
We're 10 miles up State Route 13 from Eunice, Louisiana, driving past flooded rice paddies. We're going to sample some Cajun. Cajun is a dialect that has only emerged in recent generations, but has become a source of fierce local pride.
Crawfish Plus.
To hear the sound of authentic Cajun, turn off the road at a big water tower that says Mamou. Today, Cajun is as much tourist bait as crawfish pie or boudin sausage.
Here in Carl's Restaurant, which describes itself as the most famous restaurant in Mamou, you can hear English and French and Cajun, which is kind of a mixture of the two with other influences.
Un beau gars m'a dit à l'autre un jour, il dit, c'est la plus grosse largeur de contient un bœuf t'as vu? Ouais, il dit, j'en ai vu un, il avait des cônes assez larges. Ah, il dit, ah, mais il dit, pourquoi tu veux passer un magasin aussi gros que ça? Mais il dit, pour mettre ton taureau dedans.
While I was hanging out in Carl's, there was a steady stream of people arriving at Fred's Lounge across the street. Fred's motto is, Laissez les bons temps rouler, let the good times roll. The lounge has become an institution, as has its owner, Aunt or Tante Sue.
Tante Sue, would you describe what happens here on a Saturday morning?
The only description I have about Fred's Lounge is we have a wonderful time, and I think this is one of the places that you have the most true feeling of Cajun culture there is. We have people coming in at 8 o'clock. We promote to offer them Bloody Mary because it's a mild drink and it's very good. Once that band starts playing, they do start drinking.
Every Saturday, it's not just drink that's being mixed, but language, too. as the local radio station broadcasts live from Fred's.
Dernier sponsor de la journée. Et ça, c'est pour le magnifique barbecue sauce. Jack Miller's barbecue sauce. Le vrai goût de Cajun dans chaque bouteille. Jack Miller's barbecue sauce, on mène le meilleur flavor.
C'est bon.
Oh, la sauce à Jack Miller's. Jack Miller's barbecue sauce. All right.
Special request, la chanson de Mardi Gras.
American English smothered in Cajun is what you hear in Taunt Sue's speech.
We have Fred's Lounge t-shirt with the accordion on the front, which is our regular logo. And when the accordion starts playing in the band, I play my accordion on my t-shirt. And I have a great time, and I don't miss a note. I don't know how to play the accordion, but I don't miss a note on my t-shirt.
Perhaps it's best to leave before Taunt Sue gets too carried away with her accordion playing. I'm heading out of Mamou to the west. I'm on my way to the Texas border and the next leg of my journey through American English. We've just been listening to French here in Louisiana. In fact, this whole area could still be speaking French if Thomas Jefferson hadn't bought almost everything west of here in the Louisiana Purchase. Or, by another turn of history, it could be speaking Spanish, as some Americans still fear it might. But Spanish is only one of the language influences we're going to be looking into as we move across the state of Texas and down to the Mexican border. The Texas accent has its roots home on the range. You can hear it on the Bar J Ranch near Beeville, when the young cowhands, slow-talking and laconic, tell how to round up cattle.
You just got to go out and kind of slow and talk to them, and you can't rush them because they'll go to tearing down fences and all that. But like the cattle we worked earlier this morning, we went out there nice and slow, and they went straight to the brush. And they're probably still out there. Depends on how much you work them and stuff.
Once you break one loose from the herd, she's going to be a little bit wilder, a little bit more hot-headed than the other cattle because she's away from her herd.
Texas speech is a combination of two southern dialects. Some of those who settled here came from the plantation areas of Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. Others came down from Appalachia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. The result is a kind of southern speech that's different from anything else. Add to that a mixture of Germans, Poles, and Czechs who immigrated directly to Texas, and you have something quite distinct.
The squeeze chute, well, you got your head gate there where you can get up there and work on the horns and tag them and all that, and you can get a brand on them without them moving around and all that.
Jake describes right, we're not hurting the animal. We're just restraining it so we can work on it properly.
You got it?
Yeah, you got it.
A Texas accent is so catching that outsiders who move here, like ranch owner Linda Blackburn, can't help picking up that twang.
Down there.
Yeah. You must really love this, do you?
Oh, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
Being out in the open, I'm not a house person. Love the horses, dogs. They're working in increment of this situation here. And of course the boys, look at them. Wouldn't you like this too?
Today, only 1% of Texans ride a horse to work. The rest, as they say around here, are all hat and no cattle. Cowboy words include wrangler, maverick, rustler, and chuckwagon. When we visited her ranch, Linda organized an old-time cookout.
But this is like a stew in a gravy.
This is all authentic the way it used to be done?
Yes, sir.
And what's the name? The Wild West and Western movies have helped spread phrases like hot under the collar and bite the dust that go with the cowboy's deadpan sense of humor.
Well, the 2 a.m. call is no fun at all for a rancher who needs his rest. To heck with that thing. Just let it ring. Old Bud wouldn't leave his warm nest. But Bud, Liz cried, maybe somebody's died. Her voice though uncertain yet warning. Well, Liz, Bud said, if somebody's dead, they'll still be dead in the morning.
One major influence on Texas talk comes from Spanish, originally spoken here when Texas was part of Mexico. On the Bar J Ranch, some of the boys practicing their rodeo skills come from Spanish-speaking families that have been American for generations, and for whom a ranch is a...
Say in Spanish, rancho.
And what does it mean in Spanish?
Basically the same thing means in English. It's a place where the cattle is.
Rodeo.
Rodeo? You know, you get a wild cow, you get a bronky horse, and the cowboy tries to see how much pride he's got to ride him or to handle him.
Rodeo, bronco, stampede, corral. Like today's taco, fajita, nacho, and enchilada, it all comes from Spanish.
Lazo is what you throw at the animal to catch it. Bronco, the young horse, it's not quite broke. Pinto, the color of a horse or a bean. Vamos, it means let's go.
When you think about Texas, you think about cowboys and cattle. You don't think about cotton and slavery. But that's in the history of this dry, flat, and stiflingly hot East Central Texas. This has been cotton country ever since the time of slavery. After slavery was abolished, this land was worked by dirt-poor sharecroppers. I'm meeting two linguists at the Country Store in Springville, a tiny community sandwiched between two Union Pacific Railroad tracks. For more than 17 years, Guy Bailey and Patricia Sucor-Avila have been conducting a remarkable piece of research into the language of local African Americans.
How you doing? Welcome to Springville.
Thank you.
Welcome to the train.
Welcome to the train, right?
Oh, wow. Do you have these all the time?
Yeah,
About
all
every
the time.
few minutes, right?
For generations of sharecroppers, black and white, the Country Store was the center of their lives. This is where they bought provisions, stores, and tools. And this is where they borrowed money from the white store owner until they sold their cotton. The store has been owned by the same family for more than a century. In many ways, it's hardly changed at all. It's in a kind of time warp.
When I first started out with this project, I would sit out at the general store inside and basically hang out there most of the day and interact with people who came in and talk with them and not necessarily record right at first until I got to know people.
Hey, stranger.
The mail is still delivered at the store. There is no home delivery. People oftentimes don't just come to get their mail and leave. They come, get their mail, sit down, open it, sit around and talk.
Springville is a fictional name Guy and Patricia gave to the community so that local people would feel relaxed in their company. To win their trust, Guy and Patricia also promised them they would use pseudonyms.
Willie is a lifelong resident of the area. He grew up on one of the farms close to the store. He's always lived out here and worked in agriculture his whole life. He's a very good example of what we would call older, rural, African-American speech patterns.
You told me that when you were a boy you did a lot of hunting and stuff?
Yes, I hunted a little bit, yes, sir.
What all did you hunt?
Armadillo, rabbits, and everything I could get.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is an armadillo pretty good to eat?
Yes, sir, he good, sir.
Never had armadillo. What's it taste like?
Tastes good, like chicken.
Is that right?
Yes, sir. Sure do, sir. You couldn't rice it.
Is that right? How you cook it?
Well, my mama, she boiled him, you know, in a pot, you know.
Uh-huh.
Put some onion around him and, you know, make gravy out of him.
What we've been able to do with this research is to look at how things change over time in a single community.
We had some hard times in my days.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. You work hard, sir.
Yeah.
Like my daddy.
Willie's way of talking can be traced right back to the time of slavery. We know this because one of the things that makes this part of Texas so special is a series of recordings and photographs made here in the 1930s and 40s.
These were pictures that were made by workers for the WPA here in Texas. The top two are from former slaves who were from this district. The others are from slaves in other parts of Texas.
You think of slavery being so long ago, so long in the past.
So much of it, though, was a 19th century phenomenon.
So these people photographed in the late 30s, or 1940 or thereabouts, could actually be the grandchildren or even children of people brought directly from Africa.
That's exactly right. Okay, here are some recordings from the Library of Congress with former slaves who were born in Texas.
Born right there and stayed there until I was about 9, 10 years old, maybe more. Stayed right there. We didn't know where to go. Mom and them didn't know where to go. You see, after freedom broke, just like you turn something out, you know. Didn't know where to go. That's just where they stayed.
I said, I'm 61 or 2 years old, and I never had no trouble in my life. I said, I never asked the Lord for a nickel, but He didn't give it to me in my life, and now one of them never cussed at me.
What is significant to you in the speech patterns on these recordings?
They're very different from current-day African-American vernacular English. Many of the features that are most common in what linguists call AAVE, things like invariant B, they be working, or the deleted copula, they working. You don't see as much. The invariant B, you don't see it all, hear it all in the slave tapes.
African-American speech changed in the epic migration of rural Southern blacks to the cities of the North. Over many decades, until the 1970s, some 6 million made that journey. And as always when there are great movements of people, there are also great changes of language. In the cities of the North, the races mixed less than in the rural South. Instead, blacks and their language found themselves isolated in ghettos.
In the large cities, you had spatial segregation, but you also had the formation of separate communities, often with a kind of oppositional culture to the rest of the U.S. This created an ideal context for African-American vernacular English to develop along a sort of a separate track.
What we heard in Detroit shows how that separate development continues to this day.
I put 2 extra little loops in there.
For track music. While the beat's going?
Yeah, like when it first started, so you don't gotta start
I think what you can say is that white speech and African American speech over the last 150 years or so have developed along different paths. They've had sort of independent development, not influencing each other very much at all, so that their grammars are very different today, probably more different than they've ever been, and their phonologies aren't very similar, their sound systems aren't very similar either. It's kind of independent development.
I suppose you could sum up Springville like this. 150 years ago, rural blacks and whites sounded more alike than you might have thought. But today, whites and inner-city blacks sound more different than you might have hoped. After decades of civil rights advances, the implications are pretty sobering, because more separate languages mean more separate peoples. Late afternoon, the end of a long day's drive. I'm heading for the heart of Texas, but I couldn't resist a little detour when I saw this name on the map. Cut and Shoot is just one of a number of place names I jotted down from the map that shows something extravagant and imaginative in the Texas personality. Here's some other names of places: Wink, Telephone, New Deal, Oatmeal, Old Glory, Pandora, Rainbow, Best, Bangs, Birthright, Cash, Deadwood, Grit, Gun Barrel City, Happy, and Joy. The population of Best, incidentally, is 1. Somewhere around here, there's a man who makes a good living out of Texas talk and an art out of being politically incorrect. He started out writing country and western songs with clever lyrics. Now he writes detective stories set in Texas. He's also written a book called Texas Etiquette, which includes a chapter on Texas talk. His name is Kinky Friedman. Round here, he's known to one and all as the Kinkster. Hello.
Robin.
Great to meet you.
Kinky the friendly cowboy.
Yeah, right.
Two great Americans. You're almost an American anyway.
I'm an American.
You are an American.
Yeah, recently. Though Kinky wasn't born in Texas, he's become a professional Texan.
Anyway, welcome to Echo Hill.
Thank you.
Come on in. This is... always live in a house that's older than you are, I suggest.
I've never been here before.
Well, you haven't missed too much. Beautiful. No, actually you have. It's a very beautiful place. What are you looking for in this sort of thing?
We're looking for Texas talk.
Are you looking for a man not smoking a cigar?
No, you can smoke a cigar. We're, Kinky loves to work the colorful Texan way with language into song lyrics, books, and articles. This is where you write?
Yeah, this is my typewriter. This is the last typewriter in Texas.
Uh-huh.
I don't use any computers or the internet. I think they're the work of Satan.
Uh-huh. What are you working on right now?
I've just finished a book called Kill Two Birds and Get Stoned, which is about 3 people trying to shut down a Starbucks in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And,
Kinky's way with words has won him many fans, some of them quite important. Who are your friends here?
Well, we have George Bush.
Yeah?
Kind of a friend of presidents these days.
I see.
And Bill Clinton.
They're both friends of yours?
Yeah, and I'm kind of like Billy Graham or Jesse Jackson. I'm a professional friend of presidents.
Uh-huh.
My friend Don Imus accuses me of being best friends with Bill Clinton until 1 millisecond after he was out of office, then jumping to George Bush.
You're George Bush's favorite author?
Yes, but George is not that voracious a reader.
But you suit his attention span?
Yeah. He's a great American.
Thanks to Kinky, non-Texans can relish Texan terms like these. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit to mean all right or hi. Cattywampus for something that doesn't fit or is out of line. dad blame it, dad bum it, dag nabbit, all euphemisms to avoid swearing. Lurripin, tastier than finger-licking good, and all swole up to mean irritated or proud and self-absorbed. But to hear Texas talk in its tallest form, head for the state capitol in Austin. The legislature is a kind of one-stop shop for every kind of Texas accent.
How about joining me in at Walker County? Togetherness one more time.
Hereby recognize March 11, 2003 as Walker County Day at the state capitol and welcome all visiting from this notable county.
Though Texans are far from formal, this is the only place in my travels where I have to wear a jacket and tie. I'm here to meet an old friend, that redoubtable writer, columnist, commentator, and scourge of all politicians, particularly male ones, Molly Ivins, because no one talks better about Texas language than Molly.
We like our food spicy and we like our language spicy. This is one of the greatest places in Texas to hear it properly spoken. You get everything in this House of Representatives from the East Texas drawl to the West Texas twang.
Here's so ordered. Chair lays out HCR number 20. Be ready.
We've got guys serving in this House who sound exactly like Boomhauer on King of the Hill. You can barely understand a word they say.
You've described Texan as having a lunatic quality of exaggeration. What is it in the Texas psyche that drives that?
I think the best explanation for Texas is that Texas is just like the rest of the country, except more so. Everything here is slightly exaggerated. You get some wonderful expressions, meaner than a skillet full of rattlesnakes. And I'm happy enough to be twins. I have an old friend I camp with who always says, I don't want to die and go to heaven because it couldn't be better than this. And Texan, properly spoken, involves inventing your own metaphors and similes.
Can you think of some examples?
The late Bob Bullock, our light dove, was a great speaker of Texan, and he was one day complaining about some young whippersnapper from the Washington Post who'd been in to interview him. For to explain to me why he didn't like the guy, he said, Molly, his pants was so tight, if he'd have farted, it would have blowed his boots off.
This is the Lyndon Johnson Library in Austin. Few Texans have talked more Texan than America's first president from Texas. To its credit, the LBJ Library hasn't lost its sense of humor.
I was thinking about a story that occurred down in my own hills of Texas.
The real LBJ was famous for his salty turns of phrase. He used to say, he can tell chicken from chicken salad. During the Vietnam War, I personally heard him say, if I got him by the short and curlies, the hearts and minds will follow.
The uninhibited rhetoric and flamboyant style of Texas politics hit Washington with Lyndon Johnson. I began covering politics with Kennedy and Johnson, just as television replaced radio as the national sounding board. The new political era brought presidential voices to Washington from different regional dialects, starting with Kennedy and Johnson.
The office of President of the United States.
And I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will to the best.
Voters were comfortable with JFK's Massachusetts rasp, but LBJ's accent was another matter altogether.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Back then, his Texan accent was openly despised.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office.
Even by the late 70s, Jimmy Carter's Georgia accent did him no favors in Washington. Seems to me we've come a long way since then. That former Rhodes Scholar, Bill Clinton, saw no need to lose his Arkansas accent, partly because he could change it at will.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will to the best.
Today, ironically, President Bush, a scion of the East Coast establishment, wants to sound Texan.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
There was a popular intellectual theory about 20 years ago that the whole country was becoming more and more alike. It was all covered with interstate highways and Howard Johnson's restaurants, and everybody talked more and more alike. You know, what's amazing is not the fragility of those cultures, it's their hardihood, it's their endurance. I'm amazed by the tenacity with which custom and dialect endures.
The farther south we go, the stronger the Spanish influence. The road signs tell their own story. Alvarado, Bandera, Chico, Del Rio, El Paso, Frisco, Gonzales, Hondo, Nada, Plata, Refugio, Rio Frio, Santa Ana, and Sierra Blanca. By the time I reach the Tex-Mex border in the evening, it feels as if we're already in Mexico. Every morning it's rush hour on the bridge from Nuevo Laredo in Mexico to Laredo in Texas. It was so snarled up on the day we met Alan Wall that it was easier for him to park on the Mexican side and walk across to the USA. Alan's a language teacher who's married to a Mexican and lives there with his wife and children. Many Americans are so alarmed by the amount of Spanish they hear that they want English to be made our official language. Alan Wall is one of them.
It's a great advantage for us to have a common language. Hi. It's good for the immigrants to learn English. Thank you, sir. It opens up to the mainstream of the American society and economy. It's also an important part of our common citizenship. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the judicial precedents, these are all in English. And I think it's a threat to the linguistic unity of our nation because the English language is our common civic language.
Atención clientes de Chiví, los estamos invitando a que pasen a sus registers donde puede llevarse el gilet, deodorant, tar stripe, a solamente...
Spanish is everywhere in Laredo. It's not that the supermarket workers can't or won't speak English. It's just there's not much call for it. Even the local newspaper puts out editions in both Spanish and English. The editor is Robert Garcia.
Look at what's happening to major newspapers in the U.S. They're switching some of their segments to Spanish because they need to get to those folks. They need to communicate with those folks. For example, I work with both the Spanish and the English segment of the newspaper, so I'm constantly switching back and forth. You know, but I'm used to that. I'm from the area.
To see just how far the Spanish language has reasserted itself around here, I've come to a little border town called El Cenizo, Texas. I'd made an appointment to meet the mayor. Good morning.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
I have an appointment to see the mayor.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Is the mayor here?
No, sir.
Did she say anything about our appointment?
No, sir. She said that very important meeting. Yeah.
So is there somebody else that I could talk to here?
Yes, with Mr. Hernandez. He's commissioner.
A commissioner?
Yes, sir.
You're a commissioner. You were just elected commissioner,
Yeah,
were you?
that's right.
When was that?
November.
In November.
Yeah.
How many commissioners are there in?
We are right now. We are just two.
Just two commissioners. So you're one of two.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And tell us what the mayor. Where is the mayor?
The mayor is right now there in the country.
In Laredo.
In Laredo.
Uh-huh. It's not surprising that the mayor and town commissioners want to avoid controversy. Under the previous mayor, the town passed an ordinance making Spanish its official language. No inglés, In the border town of El Cenizo, Spanish is in, English is out. Banning English, divisive measure. Spanish is official language in town. Suddenly, El Cenizo found itself at the center of a national furor.
It was ugly. They got calls, threats, people telling them, you're in America, what are you doing, speaking Spanish as an official language in your community.
And they infuriated the U.S. English people, the people who want to make English the official language of the United States.
That also brought on a lot of heat from them.
Has any other town followed El Cenizo's example on Spanish?
I think a lot of them wanted to, but after the reaction that El Cenizo got, they stayed away.
Mexico would never allow that. We could never take over a town in Mexico, declare English the official language, and declare it a haven from Mexican immigration law.
Under that previous mayor, El Cenizo went one step further. It passed an ordinance that no town official was allowed to collaborate with the U.S. immigration authorities. So this is where this little town ends, in the Rio Grande River. The Rio not very grand, in fact, because there isn't much water in it. But through these bushes and across the river is the border with Mexico. So it's a naturally attractive crossing point for illegal immigrants. And this area is heavily patrolled by the Border Patrol. There are an estimated 7 million illegal immigrants in the USA. 7 out of 10 probably slipped across the border with Mexico. The U.S. Border Patrol has put huge resources into stemming that flow.
The tracks being back on the fence is not good. That means we're not too close behind these guys.
Imagine coming through here at night. This is pretty rough country. I mean, you'd get your clothes torn up on all these thorns and things. It's very, look at all this, it's very sharp. So what proportion of the ones who come across do you think you get?
I would say 40-50%, but overall, the usual people, I've heard different people say is 10%.
Yeah. Then the Border Patrol saw footprints in the sand. The illegals were spotted huddled in the scrub. A woman patrol officer moved in to make the arrest. No one resisted, no one ran away. They knew they'd be sent back to Mexico, and likely as not, they'd try again soon.
Living in Mexico has given me a different perspective. There was a conference, a Spanish language Congress in 2001, and the president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, was there, and he made the comment that when the immigrants come here and continue to speak Spanish, they are doing their patriotic duty to Mexico. And another speaker there was Carlos Fuentes, who is he's probably the number one literary figure, living literary figure in Mexico. And he spoke very clearly. He said that there is a silent reconquista, a reconquest of the United States. He didn't even limit it to the Southwest, as many do. He just said, of the United States.
Does the large Hispanic immigration, legal and illegal, really threaten American English? Or, like immigrant groups before, are Latinos merging into the mainstream?
Next time on Do You Speak American?
Hey, sup? How do you say it?
We'll travel up the West Coast from LA to Seattle, where knowing how to navigate the terrain is essential.
You do have to be bilingual in this country. You can be very, very adept at slang, but you have to be adept at getting through a job interview.
And look out.
La chica sexy.
There are some dangerous curves ahead.
Un beso.
Mwah. No, I made him blush.
Don't be embarrassed to join us next time on Do You Speak American?
Word.
For the down low, the skinny, and the 411 on how you speak American, visit us at pbs.org. While you're there, get tips for starting your own PBS program club so you can continue to speak American with your friends and family. Do You Speak American is available on DVD for $69.95 or VHS for $59.95. A companion book is available for $24.95 plus shipping. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Do You Speak American has been made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities, promoting excellence in the humanities. Additional funding is provided by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Rosalind P. Walter, and the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations.
I am PBS.